They competed for the same roles, chased the same awards, and spent decades being compared without ever sharing the screen. One was a master of transformation, the other a force of raw emotion. From Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and Goodfellas to Dog Day Afternoon, Serpico, and Scarface, the two carved out parallel legacies through some of the most iconic roles in film history, pushing themselves to extreme lengths through method acting in pursuit of authenticity. But who was better? To try and answer that question, let's take a look inside the rivalry between Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. From the very beginning, Pacino and De Niro's lives and careers followed strikingly similar paths. Both were born to Italian-American families in Manhattan just a few years apart, and both gravitated toward acting early on, inspired by the groundbreaking work of Marlon Brando, whose intense, emotionally raw performances redefined what screen acting could be. Each trained at HB Studio and later studied under Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio, where they were taught method acting, a technique that pushes actors to draw from their own memories and emotions to inhabit a character fully, both mentally and physically. Pacino would be cast in the mob comedy The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight. However, while the film was gearing up to shoot, Pacino was auditioning for another mob film, The Godfather. Robert De Niro also was auditioning for The Godfather, and was eventually cast in the small role of Paulie Gatto. Pacino would go on to win the coveted role of Michael Corleone, a choice that infuriated Paramount executives. At the time, Pacino was a complete unknown, and the studio felt he was too short and too rough around the edges to convincingly evolve into a powerful Don by the film's end. But director Francis Ford Coppola insisted on him, refusing to back down. With the role of Michael secured, Pacino dropped out of The Gang That Couldn't Shoot Straight, opening the door for De Niro, who auditioned for Pacino's vacated role and landed it, giving up his part in The Godfather in the process. Even after filming began, studio executives were still pushing to fire Pacino and recast the role. His character, Michael Corleone, starts the film as the quiet outsider, someone who wants nothing to do with the family business, only to slowly transform into a cold, calculating Don. To reflect that arc, Pacino deliberately underplayed the role early on, believing it was essential that audiences never see Michael's rise to power coming. But his subtle approach backfired. Not only did the studio fail to grasp what he was doing, even Coppola began to question the performance. One person who did understand it, though, was Marlon Brando. Brando took Pacino under his wing and told him he was really happy with the performance. He backed Pacino publicly, telling both Coppola and the studio the kid is doing great. With Coppola himself on the verge of being fired, he took a bold risk. He moved up the filming of the pivotal Italian restaurant scene where Michael kills Sollozzo and McCluskey. Pacino's slow, nerve-wracked build to pulling the trigger, hesitating just long enough to stretch the tension to its breaking point, won over the skeptics. That one scene finally convinced the studio to leave both actor and director alone. As Michael Corleone, Pacino delivered one of the most iconic character arcs in film history, a transformation from reluctant outsider to ruthless mafia boss. But while the performance earned him critical acclaim, the recognition didn't come the way he had hoped. Pacino was nominated for an Oscar, but in the Best Supporting Actor category, while Marlon Brando received a nomination for Best Lead Actor, despite Pacino appearing in more scenes and carrying the emotional weight of the film. Feeling slighted, Pacino chose to boycott the ceremony in protest. Years later, he would downplay the decision, chalking it up to a fear of the spotlight and a rebellious streak at the time. Meanwhile, De Niro got his big break by teaming with someone who had grown up just a couple blocks away, director Martin Scorsese. Though their paths never crossed as kids in Manhattan's Little Italy, their first collaboration in Mean Streets would mark the beginning of one of the most celebrated actor-director partnerships in cinematic history. De Niro stole the film with his portrayal of Johnny Boy, a volatile, reckless livewire who seemed capable of anything. But behind the scenes, he was the complete opposite. Quiet, intensely focused, and completely immersed in his preparation, as he'd isolate himself from the rest of the cast and crew. After the massive success of The Godfather, Paramount was eager to make a sequel, but Coppola wasn't interested. Instead, he suggested his friend Martin Scorsese take the reins. The studio rejected the idea, and ultimately offered Coppola $1 million to return. For the sequel, Coppola envisioned a bold structure, to juxtapose the rise of the family under Vito Corleone with its decline under his son Michael, inspired by his long-standing desire to tell the parallel stories of a father and son at the same age. Coppola initially asked Marlon Brando to reprise the role of Vito, which had earned him an Oscar, but Brando declined, leading Coppola to cast De Niro after seeing his performance in Mean Streets. To play the younger Vito Corleone, De Niro, determined to honor Marlon Brando's legendary performance while making the character his own, focused on Vito's stillness and internal strength. "Be more still and listen," he told himself. "I'm a listener. I don't move and do a lot." To fully inhabit the role, De Niro immersed himself in Sicilian culture, working closely with linguists to master the local dialect. He also got a hold of an old video camera and recorded all of Brando's scenes in the first film during a screening, which he used to study from, since home video and VHS didn't exist at the time. Meanwhile, Pacino delivered what many consider the greatest performance of his career, and one of the greatest in film history. As Michael Corleone, he was even more cold, distant, and calculating than in the first film, his quiet menace and emotional isolation embodying the tragic decay of the Corleone family. However, just before shooting was set to start, Pacino informed Coppola he had serious concerns about the script and would not be participating, feeling Michael came across as a one-dimensional villain, forcing Coppola to rewrite it over a weekend to win Pacino back. This time, the Academy finally recognized him with a nomination for Best Actor, but it was De Niro who ultimately took home the Oscar, stealing Pacino's thunder, winning Best Supporting Actor for his portrayal of young Vito, marking the first time in history that two actors won Academy Awards for playing the same character in a different movie. Throughout the 1970s, Pacino and De Niro redefined screen acting through their unwavering commitment to method acting, pushing themselves to extreme lengths to fully inhabit their characters. For Serpico, Pacino spent a month living with the real Frank Serpico and riding along with police officers. He got so deep into his character that he attempted to arrest a truck driver for emitting too much exhaust. In Dog Day Afternoon, Pacino took things even further, intentionally depriving himself of sleep, eating very little, and taking cold showers to maintain his character's anxious, unraveling energy. The iconic Attica chant wasn't even in the script. It was suggested on set to Pacino right before the camera started rolling by the assistant director, as a spontaneous nod to the 1971 prison uprising, and became one of the film's most unforgettable moments. De Niro was equally intense in his pursuit of authenticity. For Taxi Driver, he lost 35 pounds, secured a New York City cab license, and drove real 12-hour shifts through the streets at night, all while listening to taped excerpts from the diaries of would-be assassin Arthur Bremer to get inside the mind of Travis Bickle. His dedication would then reach new heights with Raging Bull, where he trained under Jake LaMotta himself, and even entered 3 sanctioned boxing matches in Brooklyn, winning 2. When the story called for LaMotta to spiral into obesity and decline, De Niro paused production for 4 months to gain 60 pounds, completely transforming his body to match the physical and emotional wreckage of the character. De Niro would win his second Oscar for the performance, while Pacino would close the decade with 5 nominations but no wins, a baffling stat in retrospect considering the legendary performances he was delivering. By the mid-80s, Pacino's once blazing career had hit a slump. Although his performance as Tony Montana in Scarface would later become iconic, cementing his place in pop culture for generations, at the time the film was met with harsh criticism over its violence and depiction of Cuban stereotypes. And Pacino, who believed he deserved an Oscar nomination, was overlooked entirely. Meanwhile, De Niro continued to earn acclaim throughout the decade, starring in celebrated films like Once Upon a Time in America, The Mission, and The Untouchables, further solidifying his status as a critical favorite. Pacino wouldn't truly rebound until the early 90s, when he roared back to prominence and finally won his first Oscar for Scent of a Woman. To play the blind, volatile Lieutenant Colonel Frank Slade, Pacino fully immersed himself in the role, refusing to break character on set, deliberately keeping his eyes done focused, walking with a cane, and avoiding eye contact with cast and crew. The commitment came at a cost. He once fell into a bush, scratched his cornea, and temporarily lost his vision. His co-star, Chris O'Donnell, even believed Pacino was ignoring him during production when he kept asking for feedback, only to receive a letter afterwards explaining, "I couldn't tell what you were doing because I sort of never saw you." Not to be outdone, De Niro continued pushing the boundaries of method acting into the 90s. For Goodfellas, he meticulously studied the real-life mannerisms of mobster Jimmy Burke, and found out how the mobster used to get ketchup out of a bottle for the dinner scene at Tommy's mom's house. Later, in another scene, not happy with how fake money felt in his hand, he insisted on using real money, forcing the prop master to withdraw several $1,000s of his own money for De Niro to use in the film, which they'd then have to get back from actors and extras De Niro handed the money to in the scene. For Cape Fear, he took things even further, paying a dentist $5,000 to grind down his teeth to give his character a more menacing look, and spending hours in the gym to build the imposing physique of Max Cady. Although Pacino and De Niro had played father and son in The Godfather Part 2, they never actually shared a scene. until Heat, where Pacino played Vincent Hanna, a high-strung LAPD detective hiding a cocaine addiction, and De Niro portrayed meticulous career criminal Neil McCauley. Their characters finally come face-to-face in the film's legendary diner scene. In that moment, mutual respect and underlying hostility hang in the air, as they calmly acknowledge that their past can only end in violence. The tension is heightened not just by the dialogue, but by the weight of decades of cinematic rivalry between the two actors. Director Michael Mann described them as a thesis and an antithesis, both totally immersed in their craft, yet arriving there in opposite ways. Pacino preferred extensive rehearsal, whereas De Niro, by contrast, insisted on spontaneity, wanting the moment to feel entirely real. Pacino would eventually agree to do the scene De Niro's way, and the result would be one of the most iconic and electrifying scenes in modern film history, two masters of their craft finally going toe-to-toe. Heat would be the first of 3 films in which the two would appear on screen together, with each ultimately killing the other across their shared filmography. Pacino shoots De Niro in Heat, while De Niro returns the favor in both Righteous Kill and The Irishman, the latter of which also marked Pacino's long-awaited first collaboration with De Niro's frequent creative partner Martin Scorsese. And maybe that's what makes The Irishman hit so hard. It's not just Frank Sheeran looking back, in a way, it's De Niro and Pacino doing the same. Once seen as rivals, young men vying for the same roles and awards, they've since become close friends, the last of a generation, and the true successors to their shared hero Marlon Brando. De Niro, the master of transformation, built a career on disappearing into his roles with surgical precision. Pacino, in contrast, brought fire and theatricality to the screen, turning emotional volatility into high art. While De Niro had the advantage of a lifelong partnership with Martin Scorsese, one of cinema's greatest directors, Pacino never found a consistent collaborator of that caliber, often left to navigate a more uneven path on his own. Both have delivered legendary performances, but also starred in their fair share of critical and commercial misfires. De Niro holds 8 Oscar nominations with 2 wins, while Pacino has 9 nods and 1 win. There's no rivalry now, Pacino said, but there was when we were younger. Choosing one actor over the other feels almost impossible. Like their characters in Heat, they're not opposites, they're reflections, 2 sides of the same coin. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Bullets and Blockbusters for more great content.